When I make this type of video, I ask for people to give me suggestions for vehicles. I usually take around 3 of my own picks followed by 2 viewer picks, but this time around, I'm only doing vehicles that have been suggested to me. There also won't be any super modern vehicles on the list, since I've already covered a lot of modern vehicles in the past. First up is a British tank destroyer from the early Cold War period, the Humber Hornet. The Humber Hornet began as yet another NATO project that aimed to halt Soviet armor. Based on the Hummer Pig armored car, the rear section was removed and replaced with an ATGM launcher. The ATGMs used were made in Australia, named Malkara, the Aboriginal word for shield. They were massive missiles that used an unconventional warhead. Instead of the typical shape charge warhead, the Malkara used a HESH warhead. For anyone that doesn't know what HESH is, it stands for High Explosive Squash Head. On impact, a plastic explosive contacts the target and spreads over the surface. Upon exploding, it causes massive spall damage. It's a great multi-purpose round, being able to take out fortifications as well as armored targets. The Hornet carried 4 of these missiles, with the launcher holding 2 at a time. The missile uses MCLOS guidance, meaning you need to guide it manually. Not only would you be immobile while it's in the air, but you'd also need to wait for the launcher to deploy before firing. Despite being an armored car, the Humber Hornet wouldn't be particularly fast in game, having a top speed of 64 km an hour. So in summary, it would be a somewhat mobile vehicle that needs to be set up in a good position to get kills, and will probably one-shot everything it hits, but can only fire 4 times. With all of this in mind, I think the Humber Hornet should be around 6.7, if not slightly higher. Next is a Japanese medium tank, the Chito 57mm. The Chito was originally supposed to have a 47mm cannon and 50mm of armor, but in 1943 the specifications were changed. The Chito was now supposed to have a 57mm gun and 75mm of armor in the front. One prototype was constructed to these standards, though some issues were identified. Most notably, the 57 wasn't a big enough improvement over the 47, so a 75mm gun was chosen for the next prototype. That's the one we currently have in game. The 57mm version would obviously fire faster and be a bit lighter, but would also have less penetration and less damage potential. In game, the gun would penetrate around 98mm, so I think a battle rating of 4.0 or 4.3 would be ideal. It should be placed in the tech tree as a regular vehicle, directly before the other Chito. Moving on, there's the M41 DK-1, a Danish modification of the M41 Walker Bulldog. Denmark, like a lot of other nations in the 50s, received tanks from the US and Britain. In particular, they got about 50 M41 Walker Bulldog light tanks. Not wanting to be wasteful, they decided to modernize their M41s towards the end of the Cold War. It was a fairly extensive upgrade program which gave their Bulldogs a new engine, smoke grenade launchers, a thermal sight, laser rangefinder, and more. The 76mm cannon remained, but it now had a bore scavenging system, as well as APFSDS ammo developed by AAI Corporation. It was designated M464, and the DK-1 carried 65 rounds. I don't know for certain if the DK-1 had a stabilizer, but I would assume so. If it did have a stabilizer, I'd put it in the US tech tree as an 8.3 premium. If it didn't have a stabilizer, I would put it at 7.7. This is one I personally love to see in game. The M41 is one of my favorite tanks, and the DK-1 has a nice look to it. People have criticized the lack of German vehicles in this series before. I never really considered any German vehicles, because I think their tech tree is already pretty comprehensive as it is. Regardless, I think the Weasel 1 Hot would be a good addition. Much like the Humber Hornet, the Weasel 1 Hot was designed as an air-deployable light tank destroyer. The original vehicle was constructed by Porsche. It had a turret with 2 hot missiles and a telescopic sight. At least 2 more hot missiles were stored in the vehicle's rear. The missiles were Hot 1s, so you're looking at 700mm penetration in game. The Weasel Hot never saw production. It was eventually decided that the Weasel would mount a standard tow launcher instead. The Weasel 1 Hot would pretty much be a side grade to the Jagdpanzer Hot. It would be a lot faster, more flexible, and have the ability to scout targets, but it would also have hull break, and significantly less ammo. Its small crew size would also decrease its survivability. Personally, I would place it at 8.7, either before the Radkampfwagen, or folded with the Jagdpanzer Hot. And finally, there's the T77 MGMC, an American anti-air vehicle developed towards the end of World War II. In 1943, a recommendation was made to create an anti-air vehicle in the chassis of the M24. Originally, it was going to have a quad 50 cal mount, but 2 more 50 cals were later added on. The first pilot vehicle was delivered and underwent testing in mid-1945. The turret traverse rate was specified to be around 65 degrees per second. The vehicle carried a total of 7,000 rounds. The turret had around 13mm of RHA. The crew consisted of a gunner, commander, driver, and assistant driver. As you can probably guess, the T77 never went beyond being a prototype. I'd place it around 3.0 or 3.3, in order to help bridge the gap between the M15 and M19. I think having 650 cals in a ground vehicle would be a lot of fun, And that pretty much wraps it up. If you have a vehicle suggestion, leave it in the comments. As always, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.